On December 18, 1895, 3 men entered the Rousseau workshop on Front Street in Natchitoches, Louisiana, and found 17 carved Papa Noël figures arranged in a circle on the floor. Every single one was bleeding from the eyes. The blood was fresh. The workshop had been locked from the inside. The Rousseau family was nowhere to be found. The Rousseaus had been carving in Natchitoches for 3 generations. Jean-Baptiste Rousseau arrived from France in 1842, bringing with him the old country craft of religious wood carving. His grandson, Émile Rousseau, ran the family workshop by 1895, creating everything from church altarpieces to decorative furniture for the cotton plantation owners along Cane River. But it was the Papa Noël figures that made them famous. French Catholics in Natchitoches had celebrated Christmas with Papa Noël for generations, but the carved figures were rare, expensive imports from Europe. The Rousseaus changed that. Starting in 1893, Émile began producing small cypress Papa Noël carvings, each one hand-painted about 12 inches tall. The faces were kind, the robes detailed with French fleur-de-lis patterns. They sold for $2 each, affordable enough for middle-class families, special enough to become heirlooms. By December 1895, the Rousseaus had taken orders for over 200 figures for the Christmas season. They would complete only 17. The first indication something was wrong appeared in the diary of Émile's wife, Claire Rousseau. Her entry from December 3, 1895 reads, "Émile worked until past midnight again. When I brought him coffee, I found him staring at the figures on his workbench. He said the cypress was weeping. I examined the wood myself. It was dry. The workshop is always dry. He has not slept properly in days." The Rousseaus lived in a modest 2-story structure on Front Street, near where Cane River Lake curved past the commercial district. The ground floor served as their workshop. The family, Émile, his wife Claire, and their 2 sons, Louis and Henri, ages 14 and 11, lived upstairs. Émile's father, Michel, a widower at 72, had a small room at the back of the workshop where he did detail work on the carved faces. According to the account of Dr. Philippe Deschamps, the family physician, he was called to examine Michel Rousseau on December 7th. The doctor's report, preserved in the Natchitoches Parish medical records, states, "Found patient in agitated state. Claimed to see blood on hands despite clear absence of any wound or stain. Patient refused to touch any of the carved figures. When pressed, patient stated that the wood remembered." The wood remembered. This phrase appears in 3 separate documents from those final weeks. In his statement to Sheriff Thomas Guidry, taken after the disappearance, neighbor Auguste Martin recalled hearing old Michel shouting this phrase repeatedly on the night of December 10th. In her diary entry from December 12th, Claire wrote, "Michel keeps saying the wood remembers. Émile tells him he is fevered, but I have watched my husband's hands shake when he picks up his carving tools." What happened between 1842 and 1895 that the wood might remember? The answer requires looking at how the Rousseaus obtained their cypress. Louisiana cypress grows in standing water, in the deep swamps. The wood is rot-resistant, easy to carve, and abundant. But the Rousseaus didn't harvest their own cypress. They purchased it from timber operations along the Red River and its tributaries. In the 1890s, Natchitoches parish timber companies employed predominantly black laborers, many of them former slaves or their children, working in dangerous conditions in the swamps. On August 15, 1870, 15 black timber workers drowned when a log boom broke on the Red River near Campti, 12 miles from Natchitoches. The logs, awaiting transport to sawmills, had been chained together in a massive raft. When the chains failed during a storm, the logs scattered across the flooding river. The men trying to secure them were crushed between the logs or dragged underwater. The timber company superintendent's report listed the incident as an equipment failure. No compensation was provided to the families. The logs were recovered and processed. For the next 25 years, that cypress moved through Natchitoches, becoming floorboards, furniture, decorative molding, and yes, carved figures. Jean-Baptiste Rousseau had purchased cypress from the timber company that processed those logs. His son Michel had continued the relationship. By 1895, Émile was the third-generation working wood that had floated over the graves of those 15 men. The connection seems indirect until you read the testimony of Josephine Ledoux, a freedwoman who worked as a washwoman for several families on Front Street. Her statement to Sheriff Guidry, taken December 20th, contains this passage. Old Monsieur Michel, he comes to me in September, says he needs me to bless the workshop. I tell him I am no conjure woman, but he begs, says he dreamed of men in the water, says they are in the wood. I tell him I can pray, but I cannot move spirits that don't wish to be moved. Did Josephine Ledoux attempt a blessing? Her testimony is unclear. But on September 28th, according to Claire's diary, Michel suffered what Dr. Deschamps diagnosed as a minor apoplexy. The entry reads, Michel collapsed while working on a Papa Noël face. He was conscious but could not speak clearly. The figure he had been carving, the face was twisted, angry. Émile had to burn it. They burned the figure, but they continued working with the same cypress. By December, with orders piling up for Christmas delivery, the entire Rousseau family was working full days in the workshop. Claire helped with sanding and painting. The boys, Louis and Henri, did rough cuts and assembled the small wooden crates for shipping. Michel, despite his health, insisted on carving the faces because he said the faces were what made each Papa Noël come alive. The faces were what mattered. On December 14th, something happened that Claire did not record in her diary until 2 days later. And even then, her entry is brief. Henri saw something. He will not speak of it. The boy sits and stares. Émile says it was a shadow, a trick of the lamplight, but Henri refuses to enter the workshop after dark. What did an 11-year-old boy see in the workshop on December 14th? We have a partial answer from Father Benoit Moreau, the priest at St. Francois Catholic Church, where the Rousseaus attended Mass. In a letter to the Bishop of Alexandria, dated January 4, 1896, Father Moreau wrote, The Rousseau boy came to me on December 15th. He was deeply distressed. He claimed to have seen the carved figures moving, their painted eyes following him. More disturbing, he said he heard them speaking, though not with words. He described it as the sound of water, many people in water calling out. I blessed the boy and told him to pray. I should have listened more carefully. Father Moreau's letter contains a second detail. On December 17th, the day before the family disappeared, Émile Rousseau came to confession. The priest wrote, What Monsieur Rousseau confessed is sealed by the sacrament, but I may say that he sought absolution for his family's involvement in matters of grave injustice, specifically related to their trade. He wept. I had never seen him weep before. The 17th of December was a Tuesday. According to shipping records at the Natchitoches post office, the Rousseaus were scheduled to begin mailing the Papa Noël figures on Thursday, December 19th, in time for families to receive them before Christmas. But on Wednesday morning, December 18th, Auguste Martin, the Rousseau's neighbor, noticed the workshop was dark at the usual hour. Martin's statement, I became concerned by mid-morning. Monsieur Émile is a precise man. The workshop opens at 7. By 11, with the door still locked and no smoke from the chimney, I fetched the sheriff. Sheriff Guidry arrived with his deputy, Robert Blanchard, at 11:30. The front door was locked. The windows were latched from inside. Guidry's report states, We broke the lock. The workshop was cold. No fire had been lit in the stove. The room was dark despite the hour. On the floor, arranged in a perfect circle, were 17 carved Papa Noël figures, each standing upright. Blood was coming from the eyes of every figure. Fresh blood. The blood ran down the painted faces and pooled on the floorboards. The blood was tested by Dr. Deschamps. His report, human blood, not paint. Unable to determine source or means of application. The figures themselves show no incisions or hollow cavities that might contain liquid. The cypress wood is intact. The workshop showed no signs of struggle. The tools were arranged neatly on the workbenches. Half-finished carvings sat in clamps. The family's personal belongings remained upstairs in their living quarters. Claire's diary sat on the kitchen table, open to December 16th. The last entry read, "Tonight we finished the last 17. Michel says they are the most perfect faces he has ever carved. He says they are ready now."
Ready for what?
The Rousseau family was never found. Sheriff Guidry conducted an extensive investigation. He questioned everyone on Front Street, searched the riverbanks, sent inquiries to neighboring parishes. The last confirmed sighting was Tuesday evening, December 17th, when shopkeeper Laurent Dubois saw the entire family entering their workshop just after sunset. Dubois remembered because it was unusual for Claire and the boys to be working so late. He said they looked tired but calm. The 17 bleeding figures were photographed, though the images, stored in the parish records, are difficult to view. The blood appears dark, almost black in the old photograph, running down the carefully painted faces. The expressions are serene, gentle, exactly as Papa Noël should look. But there is something in the set of the mouth, the angle of the carved eyes, that reads differently when you know what you're looking at. After the photographs were taken, Sheriff Guidry ordered the figures burned. The workshop was closed. The building stood empty for 3 months before a dry goods merchant purchased it. The new owner scrubbed the floorboards where the blood had pooled, but the stains remained. He painted over them. The stains came through. He replaced the boards entirely. The story should end there. A local tragedy, an unsolved disappearance, one of many in American history. But in January 1896, something else happened. Father Moreau recorded it in a second letter to the bishop, dated January 28th. The letter is marked urgent. 17 families in the parish have reported their children speaking of visitors in the night. The descriptions are consistent. The children describe a kind man in red robes who comes to their bedside and weeps. The children say he is sad because he cannot find his way home. The children say he is trapped in the wood. 17 families, the same number as the carved figures. The visits stopped by February. Father Moreau's final letter on the matter, dated February 15th, states, "The disturbances have ceased. Madame Ledoux, the washwoman, came to me yesterday.
She performed some kind of ceremony at the river near where the timbermen drowned in 1870. She will not tell me the details, but she said the men in the water have their voices now. She said the wood is quiet."
The timber company that processed the cypress from the 1870 disaster closed in 1903. The detailed records of which trees came from which locations were lost in a warehouse fire in 1910. By 1920, most of the old-growth cypress in Natchitoches parish had been cut. What remained was protected as the timber industry moved west. But here is what makes the Rousseau case stay with you. In 2019, during renovations of a private home on Front Street in Natchitoches, construction workers discovered a hidden compartment in the foundation, sealed behind brick. Inside were 3 objects: a carving knife with the initials ER on the handle, a small wooden box containing sawdust, and a photograph. The photograph shows 4 people, a man, a woman, and 2 boys, standing in front of a workshop. The sign above the door reads Rousseau. On the back of the photograph, in fading ink, someone has written, "We hear them in the wood. We cannot stop carving." If you find this, remember that some debts pass through generations like sap through trees. The wood remembers.
The carbon dating places the photograph between 1890 and 1900.
The current owner of that Front Street property reports no unusual activity. The house is quiet. But in December 2019, during the Christmas season, she noticed something odd about the renovation work. The construction crew had installed new cypress floorboards in the living room, wood sourced from reclaimed timber in northern Louisiana. On December 18th, exactly 124 years after the Rousseau family disappeared, she found water stains on 3 of the new floorboards, not from a leak. The boards were dry. The stains looked like tears. She took photographs before sanding them away. The stains came back the next morning. Same boards, same pattern.
She stopped using cypress in the house. She switched to pine. The stains did not return.
When asked by a local reporter if she believed the Rousseau story, the homeowner said, "I believe wood has memory. I believe there are things in the water, in the ground, in the trees. I believe that when you build something beautiful from something that witnessed suffering, the beauty can only last so long before the suffering comes through." The 17 families who reported the visiting figure in 1896, their names are recorded in Father Moreau's correspondence. Some of those families still have descendants in Natchitoches. Some of those descendants still live in the same houses. And some of those descendants, when asked directly, will tell you that on certain December nights, when they wake without knowing why, they smell fresh-cut cypress and hear the sound of water, like a river running through walls. The Rousseaus are still missing. The cypress that remembers is scattered across Louisiana in 10,000 buildings. And every Christmas season, in certain workshops where craftsmen carve decorative figures from reclaimed wood, there are reports of unusual phenomena. Tools moved overnight, faces that appear angry no matter how carefully they're sanded, figures that seem to watch you with eyes that shouldn't be able to see. In 2023, a woodworker in Shreveport started a project using reclaimed cypress from a demolished structure in Natchitoches Parish. The cypress was old growth, dated to the 1860s. He was carving Christmas ornaments, small angels. He completed 12 before he noticed the problem. The angels were weeping, not bleeding like the Rousseau Papa Noëls, but weeping, clear fluid coming from the carved eyes. He tested it. Sap, he thought at first. But cypress doesn't produce that kind of sap. Not like that. Not from fully dried wood that's over 150 years old. He stopped the project. He burned the angels. He will not say why. But when pressed, he mentioned that his grandfather worked in the timber industry in Natchitoches in the 1950s. He said his grandfather told him never to work cypress from certain areas, never use wood that came from certain stretches of the Red River. When asked which stretches, his grandfather would not say. He would only say, "The trees know. If you listen, the trees will tell you." The Shreveport woodworker was not listening, or maybe he was, but by the time he heard, it was too late to stop. He says he still has dreams about the angels. 12 angels in a circle, their painted faces weeping, and beyond them, in the water, 15 men calling out in languages he cannot understand, reaching up through the surface toward light they will never reach. He will not work with reclaimed cypress anymore. He has switched to pine. The wood remembers. That's what Michel Rousseau said. The wood remembers, and sometimes, when the conditions are right, when the carpenter is descended from those who benefited from the suffering, when the date aligns with the original tragedy, when the wood itself comes from trees that stood witness, then the memory comes through, not as words, not as images, but as blood, as tears, as the sound of water, as the faces of kind figures twisted into expressions of profound sorrow that no sanding can erase. The Rousseau workshop still stands on Front Street. It is now an antique store. The owner keeps the history of the building displayed in a small frame near the cash register. A newspaper clipping from 1896, a copy of Sheriff Guidry's report, a printed list of the 17 families whose children saw the visiting figure. Tourists photograph the display. They ask questions. The owner tells them the story, abbreviated, sanitized. But she does not tell them what she found last December, on the morning of December 18th, 2024. She does not tell them about the 17 drops of blood on the floor, arranged in a perfect circle, exactly where the carved Papa Noël stood 129 years ago. She does not tell them that she tested the blood, and it was fresh, and it was human, and there was no source, no wound, no explanation. She does not tell them that she cleaned the floor 3 times that day, and by morning, the 17 drops had returned. Same circle, same pattern. She does not tell them that on December 19th, when she opened the shop, she found 17 customers waiting outside, though she had not advertised any special event. Each customer purchased one small item. Each customer paid in exact change. Each customer, when asked their name for the receipt, gave a different name, but when she looked at the list later, all 17 names matched the timber workers who drowned in 1870. She does not tell them these things because she does not want to believe them herself, but she wrote them down. She keeps the journal locked in a safe, and she has decided that when she retires next year, she will close the shop. She will sell the building to someone who does not know the history, someone who will tear it down and build something new, something made from steel and concrete, materials with no memory, surfaces that cannot weep. But she knows, as the Rousseaus knew in those final days, as Michel knew when he said the wood remembers, that memory does not live only in wood. Memory lives in the ground, in the water, in the air that blows across the Red River on December nights when the temperature drops and the mist rises from Cane River Lake. The memory lives in the names of the 15 men whose drowning was recorded as equipment failure, whose families received no compensation, whose bodies were never properly recovered because the timber was more valuable than the time it would take to search. The memory lives in the cypress that floated over their graves, that was cut and processed and sold and carved into beautiful things, useful things, things displayed in homes that were built with wealth extracted from human suffering. And the memory lives in the Rousseau family, wherever they are. Whatever happened in that workshop on December 17th, 1895, when they finished the last 17 figures, when the faces were perfect, when everything was ready. Whatever came through those figures, whatever the wood released or revealed or remembered, it was powerful enough to take 4 people, to open some door that should not have opened, to call something across a distance that should not have been crossable. The shop owner on Front Street, she keeps the display up for the tourists. She tells the story. She watches people photograph the newspaper clippings and nods sympathetically at the old tragedy. But at night, when she locks the door and walks to her car, she notices that the antique cypress floorboards inside the shop, which are original to the building, which survived every renovation and every new owner since 1895, those boards sometimes show patterns in the grain that look like faces. And on certain December nights, when the conditions are right, when the air is cold and the river runs high, those faces appear to weep. She has learned not to look down when she walks across the shop floor after dark. She has learned to keep her eyes forward, to move quickly, to lock the door from the outside, and get in her car without looking back at the windows. Because one time, just once, she made the mistake of looking back. And in the window, lit by the street light, she saw 17 figures standing in a circle. Not real. Shadows, maybe, reflections of something. But they were there, arranged just as Sheriff Guidry described in his report. And for just a moment, before she turned away and drove home faster than she should have, she thought she saw their painted eyes turn toward her. She thought she saw their mouths open. She thought she heard, through the glass and the distance, and 129 years of silence, the sound of water, many people in water, calling out. The wood remembers. That's what Michel Rousseau said in those final weeks, as his hands shook and his mind fractured, and whatever he had seen or understood drove him toward that circle of 17 figures, toward December 18th, toward whatever waited in the wood. The wood remembers, and in Louisiana, where the cypress grows in standing water, where the history of the place is written in the rings of trees that are 300 years old, where the suffering soaked into the ground and rose up through the roots and became part of the timber, that memory is long. It is patient. It is waiting for the next person who works the wood without listening to what the wood has to say. Waiting for the next carpenter who carves beautiful things from materials that witnessed ugly things. Waiting for the next December 18th when the date and the wood and the blood align. The Rousseaus are gone. The 15 timber workers are gone. But the cypress remains, scattered across Louisiana in buildings and floors and furniture. And in that cypress, if you know how to listen, if you are unfortunate enough to hear, there are voices in the water that have never stopped calling. Sheriff Guidry's final report on the Rousseau case, filed January 15, 1896, concludes, no evidence of foul play, No evidence of flight. The family has vanished as completely as if they never existed. The only items recovered are the 17 figures, which have been destroyed. This case is closed pending new information. But in the margin of the report, in different handwriting, someone has written a note. The handwriting matches Dr. Deschamps' medical records. The note says, "The blood continued for 3 days after the figures were burned. It appeared on the floor of the workshop each morning. On the 4th day, it stopped." Michel Rousseau was right. The wood remembers. God help us, the wood remembers everything.